As someone who's never experienced ABA, thank goodness, thank you, Mom and Dad, I figured that it would be better if I read out some personal stories from autistics who have gone through ABA, parents with autistic children who have gone through ABA, loved ones of autistics who have gone through ABA, and professionals such as teachers and former ABA therapists. I'll start with the stories from autistics. One person says that ABA has made them super flinchy and that their grandfather, who got an early version of ABA, was visibly left unable to mask and relax. Another person says that they experienced torture and would shut down due to ABA. They can't understand their own needs and are unable to ask for basic things to survive, since they were taught that their needs didn't matter. They can't communicate effectively and haven't learned any skills to live independently. They say that they don't know who they are and that it's a struggle to try and learn who they are at 40 years old. Another person says that ABA therapists tried to change who they were as a person by mentally abusing them to train them to be quote unquote better. They explained that it was the hardest thing that they've ever been through. It disconnected them from their family as they felt they couldn't trust them and that they weren't loved by them. It made them fearful of all face-to-face interactions because they're still mentally afraid of the consequences, even though it's been over a decade since their last ABA session. They have lifelong PTSD because of it. Another says that they were physically restrained for not following instructions, quiet hands, and eye contact to BS. Their hobbies were shamed and ridiculed, and they were told to have more girly and age-appropriate hobbies. They were forced to try new foods, and by forced, they mean the food was forced into their mouth, and then would be yelled at for vomiting afterwards. One day they brought their comfort item, and it was forcibly taken from them. They were told that they could have it back if they did well. Their sister had to get it back 3 days later. One person describes ABA as an expensive PTSD-inducing hell they wish they hadn't had gone through, and I'd say that is a perfect description. Another explains that it ruined their ability to say no, taught them that they didn't have bodily autonomy, and primed them for abuse later in life. The stories from parents of autistic children who have gone through ABA are as follows. One parent explains how ABA was used on their daughters when they were in elementary school prior to diagnosis. The parent was never told that the methods the teachers were using were based on ABA. Now the daughters have PTSD, low self-esteem, and an inability to regulate their emotions. Another parent says that their son was enrolled in a pre-kindergarten program where the teacher used ABA on him. There was a huge shift in the son's overall well-being and attitude. He now shows symptoms of anxiety and needs rewards for any type of demand. Another states that their son was in an award-winning ABA preschool for 6 months before they realized that it was detrimental. While their son's verbal understanding and use improved, their behavior became more explosive. His anxiety amped up after a few months due to constant demands. The parent pulled their son out when he started to physically fight them to avoid school. Another says that when their child was diagnosed at the age of 3, the parent was told that the optimal outcome would be that their child would be indistinguishable from their peers. For 2 years leading up to the start of school, and for a good portion of their child's elementary school experience, they were subjected to ABA therapy. Their child is now a young teen with a range of mental health challenges and feels very strongly that ABA sent the message of, you are less than. Loved ones of autistics who went through ABA also shared their stories. One person says that their loved one sometimes doesn't know who they are anymore. Their loved one told them that they feel like a shell of the person they were before. And when situations come up that otherwise could have been managed by stimming, they melt down. Their loved one was perfectly fine before. Another explains that both they and their partner are autistic and were very similar as children. Their partner was sent to ABA, whereas this person was not. Not only does their partner have more trouble regulating their emotions and dealing with the emotions of others, but their mother, who was the one who enrolled this person's partner into ABA, is much more hostile towards harmless autistic behaviors such as stimming than this person's family is. One states that they have seen it do harm to a good friend. Their friend became ill from the stress of pretending to be neurotypical. And another says that their autistic friend was damaged by ABA, suffered a great deal, and was left in an institution. Here are a few stories from professionals. One person briefly worked in a school that used ABA. They say that it was nothing short of horrific and put adults in a place of extreme power over the children, controlling their every move and handling them constantly. The adult was always right, and the child was always wrong, broken, and in need of fixing. They explain that this is in the UK and in extremely recent years. They saw signs of trauma, especially in children who had been in ABA for a long time, such as starting to pull out hair, a desire to please out of fear by repeating, I'm happy, and trying to smile even when crying, and meltdowns triggered by the demands of ABA itself. The staff would see dealing with meltdowns, especially when the child became violent, as a badge of honor because it showed that they were doing their jobs. Children were left with no autonomy whatsoever and no dignity. Skills were tokenized, but ultimately crushed under the more prominent demands of point to the cat, good job, quiet hands. They explained that it didn't matter if a child was skilled in math or piano. What matters was that they could learn stock phrases to sound neurotypical and comply. Another explains that they worked in education and have seen a couple of children who have been put through ABA. They state that contrary to Lovas's idea that autistic children who go through ABA become indistinguishable from their peers, it's often easy to spot the students who have been through ABA. They come across as quite passive and unquestioningly compliant. They go on to explain how, while it does make their job as a teaching assistant easier, that shouldn't be a reason to make children do ABA. They say that it feels wrong to change the child's behavior just to make things easier for teachers and parents. One child had a full-time ABA tutor with them in school, which this person saw as counterproductive, as this student had fewer opportunities to interact with other children in the classroom, as the tutor was always the one interacting with them. It marked them out as different, which the student didn't like, and they struggled to make friends. The ABA was a barrier to them making friends, as they were being encouraged to present a false version of themselves to the other students. The teacher also feels that this student would have had an easier time making friends if they had been allowed to do it their own way and in their own time, rather than having friendships engineered for them by their ABA tutor. And finally, one former ABA therapist explains that it was definitely abusive. When their bosses found out that they were autistic, they said the company never had an autistic employee and played an Autism Speaks video at the next staff meeting about how horrible it was to have autistic children. They felt like their bosses were trying to get them to quit between that and refusing their reasonable accommodations. With these sorts of stories, and trust me, there are many, it's easy to imagine the harm that ABA does without experiencing it yourself. Because, again, I'm lucky enough to have not gone through it.